Everyone, welcome to Broadband Deployment News. The NTIA has come out and said that their additional guidance for the Build America, Buy American requirements of the BEAD program will not be coming out until later this summer. Be right back to take a look at that. Thanks for joining me. Rick Husey here with Zquorum. So this is a story in Fierce Telecom where they had gotten some additional information from the NTIA. So there's this Build America, Buy America program in the BEAD program that states that the products need to be made in the United States and a certain percentage of the components need to be made in the United States. And this is going to be a challenge for internet service providers and for states as they look at the request from the internet service providers that they're going to be granting money to, because it's going to be very difficult because of the lack of manufacturing that we do in certain things here in this country, plus the fact that there's going to be so much demand all at once as the BEAD program kicks off and all the states start providing money to their sub-grantees. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to be looking for lots of fiber and lots of fiber equipment, and it's going to be difficult. So the NTIA wanted a little bit more time to figure this out. So we take a look at this, and then we'll talk about also what the specifics are of this requirement. So you see here, the NTIA beat its June 30th deadline to announce the amounts it will award each state through its $42.5 billion BEAD program. So they did. We were expecting that June 30th, and it was out prior to that. But now the clock is ticking as states and broadband service providers await another milestone. The NTIA has yet to clarify how state broadband deployments can comply with the Build America, Buy America Act, or BABA. Never heard it called that, the BABA. And that's something that was in the, you see here, was in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So that was a requirement there, and it's a requirement for BEAD. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that nobody's going to start building these networks until sometime early next year. So the states are, at the soonest probably, the states are going to be allocating their funds at that time. So there's still time to get this figured out, but it does need to be figured out. So nobody's buying anything just yet, probably. I wouldn't think so, that anybody's out there trying to buy stuff. So, but they're probably trying to consider what they're going to source and how and what their limitations are going to be. So this does need to be figured out. So again, this is part of the IIJA. It establishes a domestic content procurement preference for all federal financial assistance obligated for infrastructure projects after May 14, 2022, so we're well past that. According to the U.S. Commerce Department, products typically count as made in America if they are manufactured in the U.S. and 55% of their components by cost are mined, produced, or manufactured in the U.S. I thought we'd take a look at that exact language here. So from the NOFO, you see here, all funds made available through the BEAD program for broadband infrastructure must comply with the Build America, Buy America Act. That act requires that all of the iron, steel, manufactured products, including but not limited to fiber optic communications facilities, and construction materials used in the project or other eligible activities are produced in the United States unless a waiver is granted. And even something like fiber, you can maybe make the fiber produced here, but then sometimes there's components as part of the fiber that may not be available here. And there's even gases in there, I think, that are, insulators, those kinds of things. So it's an interesting kind of challenge. The Secretary of Commerce may waive the application of this preference when, number one, applying the domestic content procurement preferences would be inconsistent with the public interest. There's several things that could fall under that, and they mentioned something here, including it's going to cost a lot more if we do this, but and then number two, types of iron, steel, manufactured products, or construction material are not produced in the United States in sufficient and reasonably available quantities or of a satisfactory quality. And again, satisfactory quality, that would not be in the interest of the public. But also, if you can't get it here, obviously that's an issue. And we have several things that are going to be a challenge here, including something we'll read about here in that story in just a moment. And number three, the inclusion of iron, steel, manufactured products, or construction materials produced in the United States will increase the cost of the overall project or other eligible activities by more than 25%. So if we can get it overseas and it's cheaper, if we were trying to do it here and it's over 25%, then they can source it overseas. So, and that would be a reason. Well, that's why a waiver could be granted. So the Assistant Secretary of Commerce or the Secretary of Commerce needs to take these things into account, and then they can grant waivers. But it does say Secretary, and this is in conjunction with the Act, says the Secretary will seek to minimize waivers, and any waivers will be limited in duration and scope. Well, if you can't get something here, the duration is going to be until you can get it here. So if you can't ever get it here, then the duration is going to be forever, I would think, because there's certain things you can't just turn up manufacturing and immediately produce stuff. So, and then further on here, it says in determining whether a product is produced in America, and it mentioned this in the article, a manufactured product is considered produced in the U.S. if the manufactured product was manufactured in the U.S. and the cost of the components of the product that are mined, produced, or manufactured is greater than 55% of the total cost of all components of the manufactured product. So if you think about, again, fiber optic cable, there's certain components in that. If you think about an OLT, online terminal, what is that? OLT, online termination system or something. That's basically what the fiber gets distributed from to the end user subscribers. And OLTs have got all kinds of stuff in there, including cards that go in there, components, printed circuit boards, all kinds of stuff. So there's all kinds of things that go in there, some of which may be produced here. It talks about steel, metal, iron. You get your housings and those kinds of things. You've got screws and other stuff, but then you've got components and, like I say, circuit boards and those kinds of items. So those are obviously it's got to all add up to 55% or more for it to be in the United States. Let's see, where were we here? Let's see. Here we are. The devil will be in the details for broadband service providers, as the NTIA is expected to provide some BABA waivers related to the BEAD funding. During a panel discussion at the Wireless Infrastructure Association Connect X show in May, NTIA policy advisor William Arbuckle told Fierce Telecom editor-in-chief, and this is in Fierce Telecom, by the way, and I linked to this article down below, as well as to the NOFO if you want to check that out, in the description of the video. So NTIA policy advisor William Arbuckle told Fierce Telecom editor Linda Hardestay, editor-in-chief, he hoped proposed waivers would be available this summer at the same time that states are finding out how much money they get. Of course, the states now know how much money they're getting now. Now, NTIA tells Fierce it will wait until later this summer to provide more guidance on the BABA requirements for BEAD. As Arbuckle explained at ConnectX, the agency must balance support for domestic manufacturing with the mandate to connect all Americans to broadband. So that's really the challenge, and that's the balance. So we want everybody to get broadband, and we want them to get it as quickly as possible. But if there's certain components that are just not available here, or if those components are so expensive that it means fewer people are going to be able to get broadband, let's say you've got to reduce the number of people that you could connect with fiber, because there are certain things that you have to get here that are just limited in availability, or let's say too expensive, then that does impact broadband here in America. And again, that's one of those caveats in there that says it's not in the public interest. So I think they have a little leeway. I think the NTIA has a lot of leeway here to be able to grant waivers. And again, some of them are just going to have to be throughout this whole program unless we can start to get manufacturing moving here. We know there's a trade-off, Arbuckle said. If we require that certain things be made in the U.S., it's more likely that they'll be more expensive. He explained NTIA wants to have some security in the domestic supply chain and create jobs, but does not want to blow prices out of the water. He said the agency is well aware that Made in America requirements don't make sense for all components of a broadband network. Well, that's good. So again, they have leeway, and they seem to understand the issue. Other speakers at the conference echoed this sentiment. During a supply chain panel, April Jackson, vendor management director at Tesco, that's a big distributor, noted active components of broadband networks are often made overseas, and said some of Tesco's suppliers are considering options to replace or supplement East Asian manufacturing with U.S. or Mexican factories. And some of this stuff, depending on where it's coming from, in China, for example, you can't buy it. You can't buy it, period, if it's coming from certain countries and it's certain components. Not probably everything, but certainly telecom equipment. Fellow panelist Doug Whitrock, EVP at Network Connect, said the U.S. cannot support the BEAD bills domestically. We don't have the resources, materials, personnel, or manufacturing capacity to fill the need, he summarized. Barbara Baffer, VP of Government and Political Advocacy at Ericsson, brought up BABA during a ConnectX panel entitled The View from Washington. The agenda is right, but the actual provisions make it very, very, very difficult. That's true. It's a worthy goal, because it'd be great if we could make all this stuff in this country, put more people to work, but it's very difficult. BAFRA explained that although Ericsson is manufacturing baseband units, millimeter wave radios, and fixed wireless access equipment at its Texas facility, these products currently would not qualify for BEAD deployments due to BABA. So they're getting a lot of their components, I'm sure. They're manufacturing it here in the U.S., but a lot of the components that they get, because of the percentage of those, it doesn't qualify. For example, here, and this is a big one, chips. 82% of chips are made outside the U.S., BAFRA said. The radios have maybe 17,000 or 18,000 chips on them. You don't think about how many chips are in some of these products. That's a lot of content that's made outside the U.S. It doesn't qualify under the BABA program. There's also a lot of other hardware that comes into play, routers, optical cables, components, etc., that go into our equipment. They don't qualify either. BAFRA noted companies across the telecom industry face a similar challenge when it comes to selling into BEAD-funded deployments. Clearly, NTIA has a lot to consider as it drafts rules for how BEAD and BABA can work together. The agency is likely to ask for public comment on its first draft of the rules. Earlier this year, NTIA released a waiver for entities bidding to participate in its middle mile grant program. So that middle mile grant program, that all came out sooner. So all of that money is starting to be put to work, and the waivers came out on that. At ConnectX, Arbuckle said NTIA waived all products other than fiber optic cable for the middle mile build, but added this action should not be viewed as a precedent for the BEAD waivers. That's probably true. But there you see, they waived all products other than fiber optic cable. So a lot of fiber optic cable is made here in the U.S., and folks like Corning, I think, we're bringing up factories. And like I say, there are some components and things that we have to get outside the U.S., but probably, I guess, over 55%, we have no issues there. So they didn't waive that, but a lot of the other components, or maybe everything else, it looks like they did waive. So, so there you go. Anyway, so that, as we can see, that is something that will be a challenge. It does need to be addressed by the NTIA as quickly as possible. Again, we won't start, people are not going to start buying anything. They won't even know how much money, they won't know if they're getting any money. The sub-grantees, I should say. So the states know how much they're getting. They're now in the process of working on their initial proposal, then they got their final proposal, they got their challenge process, all that stuff's got to go through. And then, through that, they'll be picking their sub-grantees and then working with them. So there's a long time we have between now and the time that people are going to start ordering material, but they really need to start planning for this. And the NTIA does need to come up with some guidelines on this. So it looks like later this summer, we can be expecting that. So thanks for joining me today for Broadband Deployment News. If this was interesting, if you give me a like on the video, I'd appreciate it. If you're not subscribed, click the subscribe button and click the little bell, and you'll be notified when I'm live. Thanks a lot, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.